lots of questions remain unanswered about this. As I said, of course, the crowd pointing, saying there's a man with a gun up there. The Secret Service allegedly saw him, had him in their sights, radioed down to a supervisor. Nothing was done. Lots of questions remain unanswered. Joining us now is Bob McEwen, who is a former Republican congressman for Ohio and former US representative to the European Parliament. My old place of work. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Where do you stand on this? I mean, as I said, you couldn't write what has happened in the last week. And of course, Donald Trump, I think, in some ways is a bit of a changed man, that close brush with death. But equally, Kimberly Cheatle on the stand there, obfuscating, not answering any of the questions. And obviously, tensions running high.
Well, David, the Biden-Harris operation is just, they wanted to do everything the first. They wanted to have the first press secretary that wasn't born in America and that was homosexual and everything. So they wanted to have the first director of the Secret Service that was a woman, and she had been on the First Lady's detail. And so rather than looking at competence, they look at all these other ethnic and gender factors. And she obviously, I mean, everyone knows if you have a 6'3", 280-pound, 250-pound woman, that you wouldn't put 5 foot, 120-pound men guards around her. And the same applies with male and female. So the changes that they've made just based upon ethnicity and otherwise has destroyed much of the expertise of our military, and obviously, as we see now, from our Secret Service. And we certainly hope that there could be a change in government soon where we go back to honoring people because of what they do, not because of who they are. I
mean, this is the whole DEI stuff, isn't it? Diversity, equality and inclusion. When you look at that security detail surrounding Donald Trump there, you've got smaller, slighter women trying to protect a large bloke, and clearly they couldn't do it.
Obviously, they should be able to carry the protectee. If you look back to when Reagan was shot, if you just watch that thing immediately, within 2 seconds, it is all over. Immediately at the first pop, the security agent on his left turns, spreads himself as wide as possible, throws his arms aside and protects. The security assistant right behind Reagan gives him a full jab in the back and slams him on the floor of the car, and the car is underway, all within a matter of seconds. Here you see Donald Trump is there for over 2 minutes. These little girls are saying, "What do we do next?" You can hear them saying, "What do we do next? What do we do next?" And then finally he's exposed, not the least of which is to not even protect the roofs because it had a 7% slant, which 7 degrees is about the same as what the yard was at the same time. Virtually, they said we only protect flat roofs. A person of that incompetence should not even be in the service, let alone directing the service. And if you saw yesterday in committee, every single member of the committee called for her to resign immediately. But of course, under the Harris-Biden operation, she's probably one of their heroes.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? They're definitely protecting her. And of course, as I said, she evaded all the questions. And so many questions remain about how was someone allowed on that flat roof, which was in a line of sight, which was so close. And of course, and then she said, of course, we identified it as a weakness and yet did nothing about it. I mean, none of that makes any sense. Let's move on, though, shall we, and talk about Biden standing down and the papers here. They're slightly behind because obviously it's been overnight, but the front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning saying coronation for Harris as rivals step aside. We've also got donor dollars pouring into Harris, promising victory. The money that is coming in to her campaign is extraordinary. $81 million in the first 24 hours. I think it's now $100 million on. And on top of that, the fundraising committee brought in a further $150 million. Money talks in America, and there's this great article by Freddie Gray in The Spectator saying, where he quotes Mark Hanna, who says there are two things that are important in American politics. The first is money, and I can't remember what the second one is. It's cash.
Yes. Well, it's certainly the great thing about the Democrats and the left is that you always know what they're up to because it's whatever they accuse you of. And so this thing, they claim that somehow or another the democracy is being threatened. And yet what they've done is to try to have their Democrat secretaries of state rule Donald Trump off of the ballot, and had to go to the Supreme Court and put a stop to that. And then they're trying to put him in jail. And of course, that's falling apart. And then here we are just hours before the deadline to go to printing the ballots in some of the states. And they absolutely move in and swap out their candidates for president. Within 24 hours, a man who said that I am the president and I'm running for re-election, and the money interests that control that party, the oligarchs from San Francisco, where she's from, and New York, Wall Street, they said, nope, we opt for another person. And lo and behold, you see it right there before your very eyes. Hopefully the election will be such that we'll go on talent and ability. We'll go back to peace and prosperity, protecting our borders, cutting inflation back. The cost of the same home, exactly the same home, now costs twice as much because of inflation and interest rates as what it did just 4 years ago under Donald Trump. So we hope that what we've seen in Afghanistan and in Ukraine and elsewhere, that we'll go back to having those of competence in charge and not just DEI hires, as we see there on the screen.
Well, you talk about DEI, of course. Her mother, Kamala Harris's mother, is Tamil Indian, father is Jamaican American. I mean, she's not exactly had a great track record in office, has she? She failed to get on top of immigration, which was her brief. Is she really the best that the Democrats can come up with?
Well, David, you make a very good point. See, the three of the 7 largest tech firms in the world are headed by Indians in Silicon Valley, which is the suburbs of San Francisco, where she's from. And so when she was raising money to run for the Senate, she was the first Indian candidate for the Senate. And when she won, she was the first Indian American in the Senate. Everything was going fine with her Indian heritage until she decided to run for president, and she threw that to the side, and now she no longer relies upon that. You can see how they operate. And I'm convinced that I think the only person less popular than Joe Biden is Kamala Harris.
Well, Nigel Farage, who I'm sure you know who he is, he said it would be absolutely potty for Americans to vote for Kamala Harris on the basis she would be the first female president of the United States and, of course, the first female president of with an ethnic background. But she's now going on the offensive and essentially saying, in terms of her running mate, she wants to have a white man.
Yes, and that's always what the attack is. See, on the left, they can't say, look what we've done, having turned our cities in the third world hellholes, where people are coming here and with no identification, they're sleeping on the streets, something we've never seen in the history of the country. So they can't talk about crime, they can't talk about the border, they can't talk about inflation, they can't talk about the economy. And so what they're going to do, and just mark my word, the left always does this, is they go on the attack. And if you don't agree, then you're anti-woman and you're racist. And so that's their thrust all the time. And as Speaker Pelosi said the other day, she said we could take a salt shaker and paint it blue. That's the color of the Democrat Party.
Well, I mean,
get a salt shaker, paint it blue, and it would get 48% of the vote.
Well, you cynic. I mean, look, she's going to choose a white running mate. I mean, there are states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Of course, I'm not sure that she actually appeals to those kind of states, and this is why they want to bring in someone who might appeal to the blue-collar workers there. Bob, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Bob McEwen there, former Republican Congressman for Ohio and former US representative to the European Parliament.